And welcome back to our conversation with David Rubin, former mayor of Shiloh or Shiloh, Samaria in Israel, also the founder and president of the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund and author of 3 books, God, Israel, and Shiloh, Returning to the Land, The Islamic Tsunami, Israel and America in the Age of Obama, and Peace for Peace, his newest book, Israel in the New Middle East. And if you are just joining us, we are talking with David Rubin, and we have added into our show a panelist of local individuals that you may know well. Joining us now is Pastor Jim Menke from New Hope Christian Center, Pat Stelzer from Shawnee Alliance Church, and Dan Beck, retired Allen County Sheriff. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being with us.
Good to be here.
Our individuals have several questions prepared for Mr. Rubin, and we're going to start with Pat.
David, I would like to ask, in view of the Boston bombings, we know for sure that terrorism is here and it's a reality. How can we protect our children? How can we teach our children to handle this?
Well, I think that our reaction to the Boston terror attack has to be on several levels, on 3 different levels, in fact. First of all is the national level, the national leadership level. That the national leadership has to recognize that we're talking about Islamic terrorism. That's the first thing that we need to understand. The adjective Islamic that was removed from the word terrorism by the Obama administration has been a tactical, strategic mistake. And it's, if we understand that it's Islamic terrorism, then we will know how to respond as a nation much more easily. Number 2, how does the public react as a whole? And I say, as in Israel, we need to be going on with our lives. You know, the Israeli people are a resilient people. We continue with our lives no matter what. We continue going to school, we continue going to work, we continue going out on an evening. We don't let the terrorists stop us, because if we stop doing any of those things, then the terrorists have won.
That's right.
Yes, we take precautions. We have to take precautions as a nation. I remember when I first moved to Israel, going into a department store, and as I was going into the department store, they're checking my bags. I said, wait a second, you know, in the United States, you know, and I grew up in the United States. In the United States, they used to check the bags as you're leaving the department store to see if you're shoplifting. But here they check you as you go in. And we need to continue to do those things. We need to continue checking. But the national leadership has to be on the offensive, because the best defense is a good offense. And as far as the children are concerned, and that's really my heart, because as you, I believe you know, my 3-year-old son and I were wounded, shot and wounded in a terrorist attack some years ago. And one thing that we noticed, my wife and I, after that terrorist attack, when my son came back from the hospital several weeks later, and he had already gone through one operation, he had another one coming up after that, because he was shot in the head. And, well, thank God the bullet that went through into his head and through his neck missed his brain stem by 1 millimeter. So we're thankful, we're blessed that we survived that attack. But one thing we saw several weeks after he came home from the hospital, when he came home from the hospital, is that he would go walking in the middle of the night screaming at the top of his lungs. And my wife and I realized that there's deep psychological trauma in the children. And, well, not just him, but so many others. And there are others who suffered far worse. So that's how I ended up starting the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund, with the purpose of healing the trauma of the terror victim children and rebuilding the biblical heartland at the same time. So when I look at the terror attack in Boston, I tell parents, be aware. That's number 1. Be aware that your children have probably suffered from trauma, from psychological trauma, from that terrorist attack. Even if they did not get wounded themselves, even if they did not have a family member who was wounded, even if they didn't even live in Boston,
Right.
and they saw it on the news, because children are very smart. They understand that it could happen to them too. And it's up to us as adults to be aware that that is something that trauma can come out later on. You may not see it now. With children, you just see the smiling faces, and if you come into our therapeutic educational complex in Shiloh, you will see children who are smiling, who are playing, but the trauma is there underneath. It comes out in all the wrong ways, in aggression, in sleepless nights, and an irrational, excessive fear of going out on the roads. And if we don't treat it the way that we treat it, which is with art and music and animals, if we don't treat it in the way that children can be reached, then the trauma is going to be there for many years to come.
Very good things to be pondering. The terrorism overseas is coming closer and closer to us here in the United States, of course, not only with the Boston situation, but other things. Gentlemen, I'd like each of you to make sure you have opportunities to ask. Sheriff Beck, do you have a question for David Rubin?
Yeah, I've got a question. I've got a comment very quickly. But David, I agree with you that the national leadership of this country has totally ignored the Islamic terrorist connection in order, I think, for public relations and to be accepting of all religions. But let me say this, that the two young men that in Boston were Islamic fundamentalists that perpetrated this crime, and they were purported by the liberal media to be just have strong religious beliefs. Well, that's not accurate, that's not true. So that's my minute of saying. But I would like to know more about your foundation and your efforts to raise funds to help the children that have experienced terrorism, because I think we want to help here in the United States as much as we can with that.
Well, I think that one thing that I should point out is that the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund is an organization that has a reach already throughout Samaria, where we have projects, therapeutic and educational projects for children across Samaria, which is the whole northern region north of Jerusalem. And we get donations from Israel, we get donations from Europe, but our primary source of donations is from Christians here in North America, in the United States specifically. And I think it's a wonderful thing not just practically for our projects, but on several different levels. It's a wonderful thing because it helps our projects for the children, yes. It's a wonderful thing also because it brings blessings to the United States of America, because it says in Genesis chapter 12, those who bless Israel will be blessed.
Right.
Well, either we believe that the Bible is true or we don't believe that the Bible is true. We don't believe that God is a finicky God that changes his mind. So if he believes that, if he said clearly to us that those who bless Israel will be blessed, then it's so. And those blessings will come back to the United States by those who stand with us. And obviously, I know that our website has been up on the screen, Shiloh, S-H-I-L-O-H, IsraelChildren.org. And anyone who wants to donate online can just go on there. And one more thing I wanted to say is that Jews and Christians standing together in these times not only will help us to strengthen Israel in these times, not only will bring blessings to the United States in these times, but will help all of us to counter that threat from Islamic terrorism, because that Islamic threat is something that's going to bring down both of our houses if we don't stand together.
Absolutely.
What a strong statement, important statement. We'll bring down both of our houses. Pastor Menke, I know you have stood for Israel for as long as I've known you. What are your thoughts?
Well, David was mentioning when we were waiting before we came out on the set here about the children, that they are tomorrow's Israel. They will have children and they'll be the seed for the Israel future. I've often told our congregation that our kids are tomorrow's church, but in reality, they really are the church now. And I felt what he was saying, you know, concerning these children, because biblically you go back, concerning Abraham, the Lord says, how can I keep from him these secrets? I need to tell him because I know how he'll conduct his house. God is interested in the children. And I was watching a YouTube broadcast where you mentioned that you had been in your bomb shelter. We don't know what that's like here in America. I remember during the Cold War, they were building them, but I'd never been in one. But something gripped me when you said you were in a bomb shelter, and that was right after you and your son had been shot. And that's not uncommon in Israel. I mean, visiting a bomb shelter is weekly, if not sometimes daily occurrence. And I can only imagine the trauma, but I think the children really need help. And I believe we as a people, especially the churches, we need to do what we can to help and bring relief, because the blessing of God is in it and the favor of God is in it. But I was strongly impressed with the fact that you yourself, you were here, you were there, but while you were back home, you were back in the bomb shelter. And I'd just like to ask you about that, because your son experienced trauma because he was hit. But the other children experience trauma because it's all around them. It's a daily part of their life. We have terror here, and we got TV here, but it's nothing like what you've experienced here. Could you tell us what the average child experiences?
Well, as you said, it's all around us. We've had children who've lost siblings. We've had children who've lost parents, who've lost both parents in some cases in terrorist attacks. There is not one child in the greater Shiloh township who does not know either a family member or a friend or a neighbor or a teacher who's been killed or wounded in a terrorist attack. Everyone has been traumatized to varying degrees. So it's very deep. It's very much part of, well, I have to say, it's part of who we are. Mm-hmm. It's part of our fate that we as a people have to confront this in these times. And you know, I often say we're the front lines of the war on Islamic terrorism. But our children didn't choose that role, and it's important for us to help them to get through it. Mm-hmm. The children who we're raising in the biblical heartland of Israel are children of great faith, and they're growing up with a strong religious education, with a strong understanding of their connection to the Bible, to the land of Israel, and to the God of Israel. Mm-hmm. But they're still children, and we have to help them to get over these psychological traumas.
You made a statement in your book, The Islamic Tsunami, about when Israel retaliates out of military necessity. They target either a military fortress or a bunker or a ammunitions dump or something like that. But when the Islamic terrorists or the Palestinians equal strike, they go for the children, for the homes, the cities, the rural areas, the family life. They don't target military sites. They go to strike at the heart of society. And I was near Shiloh 8 years ago at a kibbutz, and I was just greatly impressed at the love of the community, but the struggle they were in. Even at that time, though, I didn't realize that central in the heart of Israel, there's still so much terror threat to the north, to the south, but it's across the whole land. Is that correct?
And David, we've got about 90 seconds left in the show, so I'm going to have to ask you to give a real brief answer to this.
Well, yes, it's widespread. It's in the south, it's in the north, it's in the central part of the country. And we have to know how to respond to that. We need to respond clearly. We have the nuclear threat from Iran right now, which is hanging over our heads. Mm-hmm. There are about 100,000 well, actually it's estimated to be a lot more than that now. 100 to 200,000 missiles being pointed at all of Israel's major cities as we speak. From the Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon, from the Hamas terrorists in Gaza, and from the terrorist nation in Iran. And Israel as a nation needs to be strong. We need to be able to counter that. And we hope that the United States of America will be standing with us.
And in your final 30 seconds, what message would you, if you can do it in 30 seconds, could you give to the United States of America to encourage us to be taking the right direction?
Well, I want people to be aware that that it's important to be aware. It's one thing to have a heart for Israel. It's another thing to get educated about Israel. And a good way to start is by getting copies of my book, Peace for Peace, The Islamic Tsunami, and God, Israel, and Shiloh. And you can just go right to the website, which is davidrubinisrael.com, and they can order it straight from there.
All right.
And then once they've ordered it, then they can start speaking to their friends and neighbors and get in touch with the politicians and start to change the priorities for the United States.
All right. Well, David Rubin, thank you so much for joining us. Dan, Jim, and Pat, thank you as well for joining us on this program. We do definitely encourage you to order your copy of Peace for Peace, Israel in the New Middle East. It's a history lesson. It's a biblically contrived history lesson, a great way to learn, and like David said, then you have the right education as you speak to other people. Those websites again are davidrubinisrael.com and shilohisraelchildren.org. You can see them right there on the screen. And if you have any further questions, you're certainly welcome to call us here at TV44. We want to thank you so much for joining us today on this In the Community special production. Thank you to David Rubin, and thank you for being a viewer. Have a good day.